Mel Ustad. I'm the EPSCoR, South Dakota EPSCoR South Dakota EPSCoR director, I guess, and then the project, the PI on the current Track-4 EPSCoR proposal from NSF. And I want to welcome everybody to the workshop here on proposal preparation, focusing on career proposals as well as Track-2, and Kelvin's going to talk about a number of other opportunities that early investigators have throughout the federal government. I'm going to introduce Dr. Kelvin Chu, who is with the implementation group, and he'll give you more background on the group and himself this morning when he gets started. Kelvin worked with us when we submitted our Track-1 proposal a few years ago, and has worked with a number of people in South Dakota on proposals, various proposals, and has been a program officer at the National Science Foundation, and is very, very helpful. And I also, and Kelvin will talk a little bit about this, but just for your information, if you choose to pursue a career proposal or NSF Track-2 or Track-4, the EPSCoR office here, the state EPSCoR office, will provide financial support for you to do that, and have communicated to the campuses that will fund 75% of the cost, and then they would want, pick up the other 25%. So make that aware, and if you're want to pursue that, then make sure you follow up with your research officer on your campus and work with them to do that and get their approval. And then Kelvin will give you a few more details on that process, because they have a kind of a schedule that you would need to meet for them to give them time to review and offer feedback and so forth. So with that, I want to thank Kelvin for taking time and doing this morning, and I'll turn it over to him. You're still muted, Kelvin.
So great, thank you, Mel. My name is Kelvin Chu, and thanks for making time during what is this, whatever, the weirdest period of all of our lives. I realize just how large a commitment it is to be on a Zoom call for 4 hours, so I will try to be as concise as possible and talk about both career as well as Track-4, the EPSCoR Track-4, and the Track-2 opportunities since Track-2 was just released. So my name is Kelvin Chu. I'm with the implementation group. I'm a vice president with the T.I.G. I was a program officer for 3 years in the Office of Integrative Activities at NSF, and before that I was a physics professor at the University of Vermont for 15 years. So when I was there, I helped run the EPSCoR program and the IMBRI program. So I'm going to be talking to you today about the NSF career, as well as 2 EPSCoR opportunities. And because we're on Zoom, and it's hard for me to take questions and sort of parallel process this, I would ask that you save your questions to the breaks in between sections, and we'll definitely stop and ask questions then. I don't know if it's more convenient to put them in the chat, but we'll just wing that piece of it. This is being recorded so that the people, the South Dakota faculty who weren't able to make this the entire meeting, will be able to see things. And also Marcy from South Dakota EPSCoR has the slides. Okay, so now let's see, why can't I? Okay, let's go forward. All right, so our agenda today is pretty straightforward. I'm going to tell you a little bit about us, and then we'll talk about the Track-2 program, the career in Track-4. We'll take a little break, and then we'll talk about proposal development and best practices, and then we'll take questions. And then my understanding is that there will be speakers who have received both careers and Track-4s to talk a little bit about their experiences and share their best practices. Okay, so now okay. All right, so let me tell you about TIG. We're a consulting group. We're a research development firm. We nominally have offices in DC, but we're scattered throughout the country during the pandemic. And we work with institutions of higher education to help you write competitive proposals to federal agencies. We were established in 1994 as a sister company to Van Scoyoc Associates, which is a lobbying firm. But none of us are lobbyists. So we do many things. We're a soup to nuts operation for most vice presidents for research offices. The three things that you should care about for this talk are the ones that are bolded in the bottom left-hand corner, which is that we do workshops and seminars. We work with faculty on proposal development, and we provide red team expert reviews for proposals that are under development, as well as evaluation of projects. And let's see, so here's our staff. We were started back in 1994 by a guy named Joe Danik, who's the senior VP. Joe was at NSF for 25 years before that as a division director. Andre Bolden and I are the vice presidents. Eleanor Bowling is our associate VP. And if you've worked with TIG, you've worked with one of the four of us. And then we have two staff, Tom Devlin and Madeline Roeder. When we work on proposals, for example, my training was as a condensed matter physicist and a biophysicist. So I'm not going to be an expert in materials science or in the social science pieces. And because of that, we complement what the skills that we have from our agency experience with a suite of senior associates and disciplinary experts. These are people who essentially we would have used to review your proposal when we were at NSF. So they're disciplinary experts who have expertise in the field that you happen to be running a program in, and they have a track record of successful funding in that program also. And so this is a description of how TIG can help you. And what I've tried to portray here is what the normal grant writing process was like, at least for me, when I was a faculty member. I would see a solicitation, I would think about writing, I would write, and then I would submit it to the OSP. And then there'd be this merit review process, which was a big foggy cloud to us. And then there's the Eigen states are either you're happy or you're sad at the end. And so this is what most people go through, and TIG's job is to work with you through every stage of this. So I don't know if you can see where the mouse is, but let's just pretend you can. At the beginning part of this process, we can help you locate opportunities. When you find a solicitation you want, we can help you analyze it, and we'll sort of describe how we do that in the talk today. If you're working on a large proposal like an EPSCoR Track-1 or an ERC or something like that, we'll help you build your team. And then during the writing process, we go through a series of internal reviews where we try to make sure that there's compliance and alignment with the solicitation, help you test out some ideas. And then as the work product gets better, we work with you on disciplinary reviews. And then after the merit review process, if you're a happy person, that's great. We're happy for you also. And we can help you with the evaluation as well as the implementation of the project, as well as prepping for site visits. And if you're sad, we're sad with you. And we will perform something called a post-factum analysis, which is an analysis of the reviews to give you an honest opinion about first whether or not it would be worth resubmission, and second, if you were to resubmit, what would be the things to go after first in terms of the low-hanging fruit for making the proposal stronger. So this is sort of a description of what we can do. We will, in addition to these things, we will help you prepare white papers to discuss your ideas with agency program staff. We'll try to set up a schedule of targets for drafts, and we can provide consults on strategy, programmatic alignment, and we've been around for 26 years now. This is one of the problems with having been a faculty member is is you can tell the joke, let's see, what's the best part about being assistant professor? And the best part is, of course, that you get to pick which 80 hours of the week you want to work. And so we are essentially, we are on call 24/7 to help you, and we'll work with you until your proposal is submitted. Let's see, this is a lot of propaganda. So let's, I think the real reason to use TIG is, especially in these times, funding is becoming more and more competitive. Success rates at the NSF, depending on which directorate you're at, are as low as 18 or 14%. And so we would like to help you be part of that 18 or 14%. Many of the things that we were taught as faculty members didn't prepare us for writing grants. You know, as a graduate student or as a postdoc, you learn how to write papers, you learn how to do research, but the grant writing piece is a different monster from what we've been trained for lots of the time. And therefore, we are your competitive edge for going after federal funding. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about early career stuff. We'll talk a little bit about NSF career, and then I'll mention 2 EPSCoR projects. The EPSCoR Track-4 is another project, is another program for early career faculty. And then I want to briefly mention EPSCoR Track-2, mostly because it's a sort of mid-scale thing that some of you should be thinking about going after, even if you're early career faculty. Because of the size of it, it's an opportunity for you to partner with your colleagues in South Dakota as well as in other EPSCoR jurisdictions. All right, so we'll talk about NSF EPSCoR, but there are early career faculty programs across the federal agencies. USDA, NIFA, which is the National Institute for Food and Agriculture, has one. The Department of Defense has something called the Young Investigator Programs. Those are closed for this year. The submission date was in the middle of July. Department of Energy has one that was recently released. Pre-applications are due towards the end of November, and full proposals are due in February. You have to be invited for that. NASA has one that's based out of the ROSES suite of solicitations, and that's due in essentially a month. And then NIH and NSF also have programs. NIH is a little weirder, so we're going to devote a slide to that, and then we'll talk about NSF programs. NIH has, they don't have a specific program necessarily for young investigators, but they do give you an edge. So NIH language is that they have things called new investigators and early stage investigators. You're a new investigator if you haven't gotten your own independent award. So for those of you in the NIH realm, an independent award is typically something called an R01. And if you don't have one of those, then you are still a new investigator. If you are within 10 years of your PhD or MD, then you're called an early stage investigator or an ESI. And an ESI, there's an edge for you when you submit a proposal. And if it gets scored well, then you're prioritized for funding. So no specific programs, unlike the other agencies, but you do get an edge if you're an early stage investigator. All right, so let's talk about NSF. Before we do career, there are a couple of opportunities that are at NSF specifically for early career faculty. One of them is the Computer Information Science and Engineering Research Initiation Initiative, which is a small amount of money. It's $175K over 2 years, but it's essentially to support untenured faculty or research scientists in the first 3 years of an academic position after their PhD. So as your first 3 years as an assistant professor. And it's to provide that sort of infrastructure that may not exist at your institution for supporting computer and information science research. So that's run annually. These are due the 2nd of November. So in, I don't know, a week, essentially. Oh, this week maybe. But they're certainly something to think about. And you know, it's not $500,000, but $175K is still, it's still money. So now let's just talk about career. NSF's career program is the flagship program for anyone who's eligible for NSF funding. So in a STEM topic that's not biomedical. Career is a constant of the motion. The cadence for how career runs is pretty well established. And I would say that we'll show you some resources at the end of this section, but there are a lot of resources out there for how to best develop a career proposal. We're going to talk a little bit about the program, and then I'll give you some strategies for that before we move on to the EPSCoR programs. Careers are traditionally due in the end of July. In years past, they've been due depending on which directorate you apply to, but now they've decided that's too crazy and that everything is due all on the same day. So the solicitation is NSF 2525, and the intent for career on the outset is to provide support for you as a faculty member to develop your career as an outstanding researcher and educator who can effectively integrate teaching, learning, and discovery. There is so much hidden in that one sentence that we'll need to parse that. But let's talk about the second bullet for next, or the next bullet, which is that it might seem like a lot of money. So minimum career award size is 400K, depending if you're in bio or in the Office of Polar Programs, then the minimum award size is 500K over 5 years. So these two bullets, these two last bullets here have a lot packed into them. Let's talk about the money size first. Let's use the bio or OPP example just because it's easier to think about the numbers that way. So 500K over 5 years, that's 100K a year. You're going to lose a third of that immediately to overhead, which means that 500K over 5 years is about 60K a year. That's money, that's great. On the other hand, it is not the kind of money that you get to run an entire lab and a postdoc and grad students on. So the career award, the way to think about it is you should, if you get a career, that's great, but you should also be thinking about going after regular disciplinary awards also, which will help you supplement this. So that's the last bullet. And then the second to last bullet, sufficient level and duration to enable awardees to develop careers as outstanding researchers and educators. So that part of the sentence is very different than what you would see in any other solicitation from NSF. And the reason why is that it is not a standalone research proposal on its own. It's an award to prepare you to be a researcher and educator. And as a faculty member, you've probably heard the phrase teacher scholar, and that's what this is preparing you to be. So one of the things you need to do here is to think about not just the basic research package that you're after, but to be able to portray to the panel what you want to look like in 10 years, right? So how to develop your career. The second part of this sentence, who effectively integrate teaching, learning, and discovery, is one of the hardest parts to deal with in a career proposal. So we're all used to thinking about NSF proposals as being 15 pages where you have a page of introduction and 13 pages of research pieces, and then you slap some broadening participation stuff on at the end. And this is not that proposal. So you're being asked to present a package of stuff. Some of that stuff is research, some of that stuff is education, but the research stuff and the education stuff have to be really well knit together so that the package itself is really compelling for what you want to do. Okay, so, and here are some happy numbers. Let's see. So happy numbers are, NSF will insist that they support new investigators as part of all of the regular core programs. 30% of all NSF research proposals last year were issued to new PIs, 24% of all awards, and numbers about careers. They're going to anticipate giving out 500 this next round, and they've allocated $250 million to do it. This second to last bullet here, awards to new PIs, 54%. There's an interesting statistic behind this number. So One of the things we'll get to on the next slide is that you only get 3 chances at the career, and there's a strategy that is derived from that number. But most of the career awards are given to people who get it on their first try. And then the second most number of career awards are given to people who are on their final try. And the most people who fail to get career awards are on the second try. All right. So goal of career program, I think we've talked about this. The one thing that we haven't really mentioned is the last bullet here, which is to increase participation of those traditionally underrepresented in science and engineering. So those of you who have thought about NSF before know that there are 2 merit review criteria: intellectual merit and broader impacts. And broader intellectual merit is how you're going to advance the field. Broader impacts is how you're going to benefit society and impact the rest of the sciences that aren't covered on the intellectual merit piece. There's a component of broader impacts called broadening participation, which means, which is this last bullet. So increase the participation of those traditionally underrepresented in science engineering. And that broadly applies to 2 kinds of groups of individuals. One are ethnic and racial minorities. So those are African Americans, Hispanics, Native Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Alaska Natives. And the other are women. So one of the things you should be thinking about in your proposal is the broadening participation piece. And the reason why we mention this now is that it's very hard to put together an integrated research and education plan, but it's especially hard to put together a compelling broadening participation section at the last minute. So now, towards the end of the fall semester, is the time to start thinking about that. And we'll talk about a timeline in a couple of slides. Okay, so I pulled the active career awards in South Dakota. There are 2. They're both at the School of Mines. One is Gadam Shetty, one is Walker, and I think Walker is going to be able to talk to you later on in this meeting today. Okay, so here's the criteria. The criteria are essentially you need to hold a doctoral degree in a field supported by NSF. So you need to be an NSF PI. You need to be at least 50% tenure track. You need to be untenured, and you cannot have received a career award previously. You also can only apply to this 3 times. So that provides a mechanism for a strategy here. If we assume that most assistant professors have a tenure clock that starts when they first start and that they run for 6 years, then because you only get 3 bites at the apple, our usual suggestion for a strategy is that you don't apply for the career in your first year. And that's because your first year, you're still sort of figuring things out and you want to test out your ideas, and you shouldn't chew up one of your chances when you're sort of finding your way around. On the other hand, all of the career submissions are submitted to regular NSF programs. Therefore, our suggestion is if you want to write a proposal, that's great. Write one to the regular program, and it will go to the same set of reviewers that your proposal, if it had been a career, would have gone to. That way, I think the kind way to say it is not to expect that you would fail, but that you were doing an experiment on the review system by submitting to the regular program as opposed to submitting it to the regular program with the career flag set. That way you get feedback from the reviewers, you can test out your ideas, and then after that, maybe in year 2 or year 3, you start submitting to career as your ideas become more refined. There are other things that make career a little weirder than normal regular NSF proposals. One here is there's a departmental letter from your chair that plays a role in the review. The departmental letter statutorily needs to say, Professor X from my department is eligible to apply for this competition, and she's talked to me about it and I support her. But being able to have a compelling departmental letter is given as an example by panelists as a thing that's a competitive edge here. And of course, our suggestion in terms of strategy is that you write the first couple of drafts of the letter for your chair. The next thing is that, I've mentioned integration of research and education, but this integration and research education really varies by which discipline you're in. So one can imagine, for example, if you're an environmental biologist, that the educational activities that you would have would include, let's say, taking a platoon of women and underrepresented minorities and hip waders out into streams and counting in macroinvertebrates and measuring water quality. Those expectations are completely different than if you're a theoretical, let's see, you're an algebraic topologist, right? Where there aren't a whole lot of students. The students that are there are not necessarily going to have the same representation in terms of gender or ethnic background. So being able to understand, so generic statements are great, but being able to understand what is expected from within your own discipline is important. And we'll show you a way to do that using the NSF Awards database. And then the fourth bullet point is talk to division contacts for additional information. This is really an indicator that you should be talking to NSF program staff around the end of this semester if you're going to apply in July. Our estimates are 30 to 40% of career proposals fail from first-time submitters because they're not submitted to the right program and people go in cold. It's very important to figure out whether or not the program that you're applying your career proposal to is the right one. And the way to do that is to talk to people at NSF about the programs that they manage and see how you fit in. And then this last bullet, so these 5 bullets come directly from NSF, but I would differ on this last one. So the last one says, for interdisciplinary proposals, contact relevant program directors or division contacts. And I would say under no circumstances would we, T.I.G, recommend that you actually apply for a situation that involves multiple programs. And that's because it is definitely a double jeopardy situation. If you're applying, I'll again use Directorate as an example. We have seen multiple proposals that have been submitted to both divisions within bio. One is the Division of Environmental Biology, one is the Division of Biological Infrastructure. And what you'll see come back is one panel will love it and the other panel will hate it, and then the proposal dies. So we would say, unless you really, really need to be interdisciplinary and have your proposal reviewed by multiple programs, we would suggest to not do it and to just simply rescope so you fit comfortably within one of the several programs that are under consideration. All right, so the next thing to think about is for careers are evaluated different ways by different programs, and it's important to talk to your program officers to understand how they're evaluated. So I'll just mention this briefly. The Directorate, there's a division within there called Atmospheric and Geospatial Sciences, called AGS, which reviews proposals only by ad hoc reviewers, which means that there's no panel discussion. It's just the program officer sends an email out with the proposal and the person reads it and sends it back. And then if there's a panel discussion, that's for most of the rest of NSF. And the reason why this is important is because the way you write a proposal should depend on what the review scenario looks like. Ad hoc reviewers read things in the isolation of their offices or their home office these days, and they don't benefit from a discussion with any of the other people on the panel, which means that if they think that something's wrong with your proposal or they don't like something, nobody's around to talk them out of it. And also, if they think something's really strong with your proposal, they can't use that to influence other panelists. Whereas in a panel discussion, there is a consensus building exercise to try to understand how to best position a proposal within the portfolio of things that are under review. And so when it comes to career merit review, we'd suggest discussing with your program staff how it gets reviewed. And then TIG is happy to work with you on strategies for dealing with that. Okay, so these are some numbers. They're slightly stale. NSF in their career webinars used to release statistics by year and by directorate. They have stopped doing that as of the 2017 webinar. So these numbers are the most recent we could harvest. All of you as faculty members are interested in what the mortality rate is, right? What's the probability of success? And this number here, this chart here shows you organized by directorate. So I'll again pretend that you can see my mouse. Oops, sorry. That down here are the directorates. So computer information sciences, geo, engineering, bio, education, human resources, mathematical and physical sciences, social and behavioral economic sciences. So this is the denominator of the number you care about. This is the number of career proposals. The things to think about here are, and they're color coded by year. So you can see that the most number of proposals happen in engineering, the least are in EHR, and then, you know, maybe MPS and bio and size are sort of in the middle. So this is the denominator. And then the number that you're actually interested in is the success rate. So I'm not sure whether or not we should be proud or happy with these numbers, but here are the success rates from 2010 to 2016 as a function of directorate. The success rate is the highest probably in geo or in size, and it's about 25%. The lowest success rate is in bio, EHR, and SBE, and that's about, say, 10, 12%. Okay. And these are stale numbers. They're 4 years old, and NSF doesn't release the funding rates for careers anymore. Not that we've seen. Okay, and then the final thing to tell you about is if you are a successful career awardee, there is a icing on the cake, which is called the Presidential Early Career Awards for Scientists and Engineers, or PCASE. And this process is not entirely transparent, but very transparent to you. So you need to be recommended by your program officer for this award. There needs to be a community service option, and the agency needs to be very impressed. If you get this, then you get to fly to DC and meet with the president and get a little ceremony there. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, so that's sort of the bones of what career looks like. Let's talk a little bit about the research goals and the educational goals, because integration of research and education is such a big deal. Your research goals should be very well argued and specific, and your project description should be able to convey to the reviewers over a 5-year period that you have a plan and you'll build a firm foundation for contributions to research and education. There's a brief description here of what should be in your project description, but the thing to really emphasize here is you need to talk about research, you need to talk about education, and then you need specific text that describes for how the research and education activities are integrated with each other. Now, this second to last bullet here is not specifically called out in the solicitation, but all the reviewers are going to be asked to comment on it. So one of the lessons that we'd like to convey here in today's talk is that you should be kind to the reviewers and give them what they want. And if they're specifically looking for integration of research and education, you should tell them what that is. The education activities you should do are over a broad range of areas and can be directed in every level, but they should be integrated with your research. And if you read the solicitation, there's a list of things that could be reasonable examples for education activities: designing courses, supporting teachers, conducting outreach, research on learning itself, incorporating research activities in undergraduate courses, implementing new methods for evaluation and assessment. These examples are not sufficient in our opinion. And that's because everybody going into the competition So let's use the number of 500 awards and an average success rate of 15%. So that means that's like what, 1 in 7, let's say. So there's going to be 3,500 people submitting to career. All 3,500 people have read this list, and they're going to be looking at doing these things. What we would recommend is, of course, doing something to make your proposal stand out from everybody else's. So you can do one of these, but we'd recommend making it a little shinier. And then we'll talk a little bit about integration of research and education. For career, the real phrase to keep in mind here for integration of research and education is, how does, not just simply, I'm a material scientist and I'm going to work on this particular semiconductor, and then I'm going to teach my class what the semiconductor is like. What research and integration of research and education means for career is, how will your research impact your educational goals? Your goals, not the activities necessarily. I mean, the activities follow from the goals. And then simultaneously, how your educational activities will feed back into the research. So what we're looking for is a bidirectional influence, communication between the research and education components. All right, so here are some resources. Career has the program page, which we've showed you, but there's also a frequently asked questions section. Some of them seem reasonable, some of them seem a little contrived. We'd recommend watching the webinar. The slides from the webinar are up at that link, but the best resource out there is this third bullet, which is a strategy writing guide put together by professor from Texas A&M, whose last name is Pei, P-E-I. Pei actually put together the book and then was invited to come to NSF as a program officer for a while, specifically to handle careers in engineering. And this book is free. So if you go to that URL, or if you really just Google career writing guide and Pei, P-E-I, you'll find it. It's a maybe 60-page PDF of short pieces by former program officers as well as career awardees about strategies that they've had for writing their career proposals. So I'm going to move quickly through the next set of slides and then take some questions. The next topic that South Dakota EPSCoR asked me to talk about was Track-4. So this is the EPSCoR Research Fellows. And this is really another program designed to benefit early career faculty. From a programmatic point of view, it's a program that's designed to get you the things that you need to do to succeed and write a career proposal. So in the perfect fantasy of how this would work, you'd write your Track-4 earlier and then use the results from that to go after a career. The basic premise behind the Track-4 is that we're all faculty members in our institutions, but we might really need to have a strong collaboration with someone somewhere else, and those could be at another institution near in an EPSCoR jurisdiction or at a national lab. And so this money for the Track-4s pays for all of the stuff that you normally can't actually pay for off of a regular NSF grant. It pays for your travel, it pays for your stay at the other place, it pays for the travel for a grad student or postdoc. And these are all those items are super high ticket items to fit into a regular individual investigator award, and you certainly would want to pay for them out of your startup. And so this is a way of sort of making that transition easier for you. So let's see, you need to have identified a place for a collaborative visit to one of the nation's premier private governmental or academic research centers. Okay, so the solicitation is 2543. It's due the 13th of April, and it covers up to 6 months of salary support and travel for you, as well as for a grad student or a postdoc. You need to have identified a place to travel to, and of course you need to have permission from your home institution to go, as well as permission from the place where you want to land. There are some budget details to think about in terms of documenting what you feel like spending money on. Okay, so the print is very small here, and I apologize for that, but there's a lot to fit in, and the slides will be available. The thing I would like to point out is that these proposals are, again, a little weird. They're 10 pages long, and the key here is under the details needed. You need to be able to present a research goal with hypotheses. You need to indicate that why the host institution is critical to your success. You need to make the case that you've discussed this with people at your home institution and that you have permission to go. And then you need to be able to indicate how the stuff that you do during this extended trip out is sustainable and what the benefits are to your home institution. So it can't just be, I'm going to go to Honolulu and sit on the beach for 6 months and you're going to cover it, but you need to be able to indicate, when I'm studying at the University of Hawaii, Manoa, I will be able to learn these techniques and bring that back to South Dakota. Eligibility. You have to be non-tenured. You can't have a co-PI. I think the rest of it is relatively straightforward. Oh, and you can't have multiple Track-4s. Okay, so here are some numbers in terms of what has gone out of the NSF EPSCoR office as a function of fiscal year. Fiscal years here in this column on the left, so 2018 through 2021, this competition is about to start. The solicitation has changed over the past couple of years, but they've really just been changes to iron out some of the bugs in terms of the proposals and deal with EPSCoR eligibility. The number of awards that have been made every year has been increasing from 29 to about 45. The amount of money they've been spending total on Track-4 has increased, almost doubled from 5.4 to 9.2 million. And the average award size, the median award size has gone from about 175K to about 210K. South Dakota has done well in Track-4s. So here's the EPSCoR jurisdiction count. Alabama has the most at 13, and South Dakota's here with Kansas and Louisiana, which is a fine set of colleagues to be with in terms of the awards. And there are some jurisdictions that have none, but I didn't put them there because we don't really need to embarrass them. Okay, and so there are 7 awards to South Dakota. 2 of them are at School of Mines, one's at SDSU, and 4 of them are at USD. And so I think one of these individuals is speaking with you later on today, but I'd like to point out where people are going. So I put those in blue, highlighted, bold stuff here, fonts. So people are going to national labs, places like Princeton, so R1s, or Tennessee, or Berkeley, Livermore, and Los Alamos. Okay, and now I want to talk about Track-2, and I will do this in 3 minutes, and then we'll take some questions. So Track-2 is a larger scale thing. The solicitation was just released. And the reason why I wanted to talk about Track-2 is because Track-2 is a topical proposal. So career and Track-4s, you can write from whatever your vantage point is, whatever your disciplinary expertise is. Track-2 has been topically focused, and that's the F part of Track-2 FEC. Track-2 builds collaborations among EPSCoR jurisdictions. So if a team from South Dakota wanted to partner with a team from, I don't know, let's say Louisiana, now is a good time to think about it. But the real reason to talk about Track-2 here is the topic that they announced. So the topic has been rotating every 2 years. And for this year, the topic is advancing research towards industries of the future to ensure economic growth for EPSCoR jurisdictions. And the key word here is industries of the future. So for those of you who have been sort of paying attention to NSF, 5 years ago, there was a new director whose name was France Cordova, and she instituted something called the Big Ideas, and there were 10 of them. Of those 10 big ideas, 6 of them were focused on research, and they were quantum navigating the new Arctic, multi-messenger astrophysics, harnessing the data revolution, human technology frontier, and genome to phenome. And so you could see how those things would apply to basically all across the entire NSF. Industries of the future is similar, but not the same. And the reason to think about industries of the future is that we expect with the new NSF director who started a couple months ago, that that individual will want to make their own mark on the institution, and the big ideas might be replaced by, I don't know, bigger ideas. So I wanted to talk briefly about industries of the future. The industries of the future come from an OSTP document, and I'll share that at the end. And they're listed here in the solicitation as advanced manufacturing, advanced wireless, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, quantum information science, and spectrum innovation science. Spectrum innovation science is usually partnered with advanced wireless in terms of the technologies needed to enable 5G. So I was going to go briefly through each of these and then stop for questions. Advanced manufacturing, here is what NSF thinks about in terms of advanced manufacturing, which is transforming manufacturing capabilities, methods, and practices. So this lives squarely within Engineering Directorate. Advanced wireless is engineering and probably size and probably MPS, but it's sensor design, human machine network interactions. So there's a little bit of SBE there and integration with the Internet of Things. Artificial intelligence, it is difficult to see a proposal these days that doesn't have some sort of artificial intelligence or machine learning built into it. And so here they want to expand the frontiers of AI. And you should know that the federal government has two broad programs now. One is on artificial intelligence, and that's across many agencies. And the other is quantum information science. In terms of biotechnology, that could fit into many of the proposals that we've seen out of South Dakota. Synthetic biology is mentioned, microbiomes are mentioned, biotechnologies and pharmaceuticals. And I think especially in the COVID era, biotechnology will be incredibly important. Quantum information sciences, there are programs at NSF for QIS. DOE also has QIS programs, but clearly they're looking at construction of new quantum memories, repeaters, networks. And then, and so here is the resource. So here's the OSTP memo that dictates what the industries of the future are. Okay, so from that, I'd like to stop and take questions if there are any. I will stop sharing my screen, and if you have questions, we'll take questions for say 10 minutes and then take a little break and then start again. I don't see anything in the chat, so if you want to just unmute yourself and speak up, that would be great.
For the results of prior NSF research, or NSF support rather, would an EPSCoR award need to be described there, since it's not actually a research project?
Yeah, so the title of the section that's required is results from prior NSF support. So EPSCoR is an NSF award, and it would need to be mentioned if the award has finished in the past 5 years and you are a PI or co-PI. So statutorily, that's what would be required.
If the budget period is still ongoing, though,
Then,
would it then
yep.
not?
Okay. Are you a PI or a co-PI, Scott?
Yes.
Okay.
A PI.
Yep. So then I would say then it would need to be listed. Usually they look for 3 sections: an intellectual merit section, and broader impact section, and an output section. And so I think the IM and the BI pieces you could cop out of the proposal, and the outputs they're looking for, you know, usually are in terms of peer-reviewed publications or presentations. But in your case, you know, number of people trained or number of groups that have come through, things to demonstrate productivity.
Good. Kelvin, this is Mel. I have a question. So for follow up with Scott's there, should they, if they're supported as part of the Track-1 proposal, So in other words, if there are new faculty hired as a track 1, should that be referenced as prior NSF support?
So that's a great question. And we see this frequently where people are not PIs or co-PIs, but are supported through some mechanism of a larger center type award. I would say statutorily, you're not required to do that. There might be a competitive advantage for doing it, but I would say be careful. So let's say you're an assistant professor at University of South Dakota, and you're part of the biofilms track 1. But you're not, whatever, you're not a PI or a co-PI. You want to be able to indicate what your, how you've benefited from that award, but you're not statutorily required to put it in. So our suggestion is, of course, to do what is the most convincing. The downside of putting it in is that when you list the award, first you have to tell them that you're not a PI or a co-PI. Second, they're going to see that the award amount is $20 million, and they're going to say, why would this so the dumb, sorry, that's the impolite way of saying it. The careless reviewer will see that award amount and go, why would they possibly want a career? So I think if you put it in, it's important to indicate how much you received from the award, like the size of your seed grant, for example, or what your numerical benefit is, your quantitative benefit is, and then also be able to indicate what the products from your particular involvement are. If you cannot indicate that you've been able to write a paper or something, then I would hesitate to list it, because it would look like you haven't produced anything given that magnitude of the award. So I'd say evaluate it on a case-by-case basis. When working with us, we would, of course, read it and try to, play devil's advocate and look to see whether or not the proposal looked more competitive with that award not there or not there. So let's see, I see 2 questions in the chat. One is from Tula, and it says, regarding EPSCoR Track 4, how visit to other universities rank compared to visiting national labs? Okay, that's a good question. So Track 4 is the one where you go and you find a collaborator somewhere else. And I would say that the evaluation criteria for the Track 4 for the host institution is, does that host institution make sense for the particular thing you want to do? So let's take an example. Let's say you really want to study a particular kind of coral. And the best place to do that is the University of Guam. Now, the University of Guam is not an R1 institution, but it might make a lot more sense to go to Guam to study this particular coral with the expert in this particular coral than it would be to go to, let's say, let's pick something else, Woods Hole, where they have a lot of expertise in marine biology, but not in that particular thing. So I would say that the way to make the way to evaluate whether or not the partnership makes sense, Tula, is to make the case that the place that you've picked is the best place to do precisely what you want to do. And in order to do that, you need to have a very specific research hypothesis and goal and an articulated plan for what you want to get out of the project. Does it make sense?
Yeah, I also have a question about Track 4, if I may.
Sure.
Just you kind of skip a couple slides very quickly, and my question is, what is the kind of is there any punishment for, or any kind of downsides of going to the institution where your former advisor worked?
Yes, there is.
There's okay.
So let's it's not a formal punishment, it's not a formal downside, but you will definitely have to fight the bias of the reviewers that what you're doing is not helping launch you on an independent career. So the usual recommendation is, could you find somebody else to go work with? And the other is, if you do go back to the same institution, certainly don't go back to your postdoctoral advisor or your graduate advisor.
Actually, its situation is a little bit different. It's different institution, but the same advisor.
Oh, yeah. If they can draw the line between you and that individual in your past.
Okay, all right. I see your point. Thank you. If you have any other comments about Track-4, please make them, because
Sure.
it's actually
So there's another question about Track-4, which is from Hafiz Ali. Are non-US citizens eligible to apply, submit proposals other than Track-4? And the answer is yes. Track-4 has a citizenship requirement. And then there's another chat here from Shankar. Does having or not having a prior NSF award affect your career chances? And the answer is no. But what you need to be able to do is to, if you do have a prior NSF award and you apply for career, you need to be able to indicate how what you're proposing for the career is different than what you did for than what you did in the previous award. So you can't double dip, right? Okay, and then there's a question from Mel Ustad. Please explain the Track 2 and 4 submission limitations by institutions. Okay, so Track 2 is limited 1 per institution, which means that I don't know if we have people from institutions that are not USD, SDSU, and SDSMT, but you are allowed 1 Track 2 proposal out of each institution. And for Track 4s, you're allowed 3 from each institution. Now there's a strategy here. So what this means is that each of the schools ought to be having their own down selection for who can submit from their institution. So SDSMT can submit 1 Track 2 and 3 Track 4s. All of those schools can. But let's talk about the strategy involved here. With Track 2, you're required to partner with people from a different school, right? So let's say a group of individuals from SDSU decide to partner with a group of individuals from Louisiana State University. Our advice to you, our recommendation is that both of you, both the SDSU team and the LSU team, should apply to be the slot, should apply for the slot from that institution, from their respective institutions. That way, if Louisiana State decides that they're going to pick another team, at least you have the SDSU slot that you can go for, and vice versa. It's very easy in the Track 2s to see that there are some jurisdictions that have really specialized in partnering. So I didn't put up the statistics, and I can add them to the slide and put them up later. But there are jurisdictions where there are a tremendous number of partner awards, but very few lead awards. And in the end, what you should be doing as faculty members is not really worrying about the overhead or the reporting requirements, but really what the benefits are to you and your colleagues in terms of building out a Track 2. So building the research capacity is the important thing here. Okay, other questions? All right, so I think we're scheduled to take a short break. I'd like to start again at 10:15 Central Time, which is 9:15 Mountain, and we'll talk a little bit about proposal development and best practices, and if you have feedback for me, please let me know through the chat. Thanks, and we'll start again in a couple of minutes. So it's 10:15 Central now, and I think I'm just going to start. While we were on break, I had a conversation with Shankar, and we discussed what the success rate for Track-4s are. So we think that we don't have the statistics from this year's competition, but Track-4s are typically somewhere between 20 and 25% success rate. It's less, the odds are better than in a regular NSF individual investigator competition. So let's see. I'm going to spend the next couple of slides talking about proposal development and best practices. Most of the slides here for the next section are applicable to general proposal development things. When they apply specifically to career, I'll mention it. And again, I'll try to stop several times during the presentation to take questions if there are some. How come? Oh, okay, here we go. So if there's one thing for us to tell you to think about, it's to be strategic. The incorrect way of thinking about an NSF proposal is that it's 15 pages and you can it's 15 pages and any idiot can write 15 pages in a couple of days. And I think that's completely the wrong way to think about it. When you think about a 15-page document, if the average award size is $500,000, then each page is worth $33K. So I would say that be very, very strategic about what you're writing and know what you want to do and have a plan. So in terms of things that we think about, we always think about what the funding agency is looking for, which means analyzing the solicitation and understanding not just what that solicitation is looking for, but how that fits within the broader scope of things that NSF cares about. The other thing to do is to think about how you're going to manage the tasks. People in our business, in the proposal development business, we write Gantt charts and make lists for everything, and we create tools for managing all of our tasks, and we eat, thousands of proposals every year. But I think for you as individual faculty members, being able to create timelines, being able to understand and make checklists for solicitations is incredibly important and gives you the discipline that you need in order to go after things like this successfully. If you just simply live off of a whole bunch of Post-it notes stuck to your monitor, first, I feel your pain and I used to be like you. And second, there'd be no way that I'd recommend that as a strategic decision about how to write proposals. And then the third is to know how your proposal is evaluated, to write to the reviewers, and to know what the merit review criteria are. And so we'll talk about these in this order, and I'll give you some examples and strategies for how to go after this. I would say that writing NSF proposals, they're very frequently, in general, the NSF proposal structure is very unstructured. There are very few things that are required to appear within those 15 pages. But there's certainly a lot of cultural expectations about what should appear, and a lot of that is driven by how the review process is run. So with that said, the first thing is know the federal agency and program. So, we all as faculty members realize that our ability to be promoted and get tenure depends on bringing in dollars. And so being able to understand the people who are in charge of those dollars and who are giving out the money is critical. Most of us know when we're faculty members where we are going to apply for funding, but very few, probably assistant professors in their first year, know specific programs to go after. So the first bullet here is be able to identify the programs that best fit your idea and long-term goal. Really, the zeroth order thing that you should be doing here is to read a lot of web pages. There are other strategies for this. Those of you who have colleagues who have been funded by other agencies, in the pre-COVID days when we would go to professional meetings, a good suggestion would be to talk to your colleagues or your competitors about and look at their posters and look at their papers and see who is funding them. And if you look at the end material on a paper, we'll see, this work was supported by NSF, blah, 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 blah. Take that number and stick it into the NSF awards database, and we'll show you a little bit of that and see where the programs are that people are applying for funding. Figure out who the program officers are who are supporting that work, and remember their names and look for them at meetings or be able to contact them. And we'll talk a little bit about contacting NSF program staff afterwards. The second bullet point here is search the awards database for programs, awards, and abstracts, and we'll show you how to do that. But basically, you want to see so these are taxpayer dollars that are being spent. There has to be transparency in how they're being spent. So every agency will have an awards database. The NSF and the NIH databases are by far the easiest to use. The NASA and Department of Energy ones and the others, including the National Endowment for the Humanities, are much, much less transparent, but take advantage of the data that you do have. So don't just have a good idea, but know what they funded in the past and who they funded in the past. Dissecting the program announcement really is putting on your best lawyering hat and reading every sentence in there and trying to understand what that sentence means. And we'll show you how to do that. Review a list of upcoming deadlines. Each of the agencies has either a mailing list or RSS feeds for programs that are released and their deadlines. And then the next one is read multiple related program solicitations and not just your specific program solicitation. So this is particularly important for early career faculty and for the career competition, because just because you think you know where your proposal should go doesn't mean that you're correct. And it's that interaction with agencies, interaction with the program staff, and being able to read not just what is being funded in engineering and in CBET, but all of the different little pieces of CBET, for example, that allows you to fine tune where your proposal will go. Know the program portfolio. That's more or less the same thing as a bullet ahead of it. Know the agency's cross-cutting priorities and programs. So I mentioned the big 10 ideas before. I also mentioned that there's a federal-wide initiative, excuse me, to support artificial intelligence and quantum information science. So being able to draw upon that and to realize that just because, for example, if you're an artificial intelligence machine learning person and your idea doesn't entirely fit within the NSF, there might be pieces of it that you could sell to the Department of Energy. On the right-hand column, the biggest thing that we're going to try to get you to do is contact program officers when we work with you on a career. And it's to discuss your project's fit with the agency's priorities and clarify questions you have with the solicitation. Your relationship with program staff is critical. There are a couple of things to think about here. The first is that many times you shouldn't be afraid of program staff. For the first part, many program officers are rotators. They are people who are like you or like me, who were faculty members and then decided, I've had enough of this place for a little bit, I'm going to go to NSF. And so they know what it's like to be in your shoes, and they're very, very sympathetic. The other thing to think about is that a lot of program staff who are lifers never had the opportunity to be faculty members, either through choice or by selection. And so I think, while program officers are very busy people and they have a lot of work to do, I would say a lot of their job is talking to other program officers, and therefore talking to faculty who have cool new ideas is important. The other reason why talking to program officers is critical is because there is not a single person who has served on an NSF review panel who has not remarked that doing that panel service has fundamentally changed the way that they write. And so being invited to be on a panel, the best way to do that is to have a relationship with the program officer and have them understand what you are an expert in and have you understand what they're interested in funding. Okay. Find out about proposal review process and merit review criteria and significance. We've mentioned that briefly. And then the last two things here is solicitation guidance is not subject to opinion or interpretation. NSF solicitations are horrible to read. They are not pleasant documents, but every sentence is in there for a reason. And so first, if you have questions about them, think about what they're asking and then verify those statements with program officers. In the end, you know, it's your interpretation doesn't count. It's what the panel thinks, it's what the program officer thinks. And being able to clarify those statements with them is important. And of course, don't duplicate already funded work means that, you know, just because somebody had a great idea and it was funded by NSF doesn't mean that you can resubmit. The work that you propose needs to be novel and innovative and stand apart from what has been funded in the past. Okay, so let's see. So I wanted to give you an example. The example I have is one of the NSF big ideas called Navigating the New Arctic. I'll show you the solicitation. Well, sorry, I'll show you the program page. We won't really look at the solicitation because we don't actually care that much. Finding program officers and seeing what's been funded previously. So let's see, this requires me to unshare something. Let's see, oh, maybe I can do this directly. All right, so I'm going to share a web page with you. This is the Navigating the New Arctic page. So there's the URL up here. Here's Navigating the New Arctic. So a couple of things to think about here. The first is that this is an NSF-wide thing. So Navigating the New Arctic is NNA. It doesn't live within a particular directorate. And because of that, when you look to see who's in charge of it, you'll see a general email address, NNA Working Group. In some solicitations, you'll see 5 or 10 people listed. It is extremely, so the NSF warns that you shouldn't mail the 5 or 10 people each if you have a question, because they all will share the emails that are relevant to that particular program with each other. So if you mail, you know, program officers A through E, they will each, when they receive your mail, send it to the group and discuss. And so if they each get one, they're just going to get pissed off at you. The next is solicitation 2514. So if you click on this link, let's see, can I open in a new tab? Okay, if you click on this link, you'll get the solicitation page, and it will tell you when it was posted and which solicitation it replaced. And why should you care? You should care because NSF had a reason to make NSF 20514 as opposed to NSF 19511. It's not just that they replace all these documents every year, it's that something fundamentally different existed between these two calls. And it was different enough that they went through the trouble of making a new solicitation. So being able to understand what's different between the present call and the call it replaced is important for understanding where the program is going, how the program is changing, what else is changing at the agency. So I'm going to go back to the original page. Okay, and then there's this blah, blah, blah here that says follow our rules. And then there's a synopsis for every program. And the synopsis can be a paragraph, it could be 4 paragraphs. In this case for NNA, it's big because NNA is one of the big ideas. Oh, it's really super long. Okay, and then at the very end, it will sort of tell you something that's important. So that's a lot of text, and you would see this text anyway if you were reading the solicitation. But the thing I want to draw your attention to are these links at the bottom. So there are 2 links here: what has been funded, recent awards made through this program with abstracts, and a map of recent awards through this program. This link, as far as I can tell, is only to keep congressional staffers happy, right? So if you're a senator from Alabama and you want to see what NNA awards has happened, your staff will click on this award and see that there have been some awards, and then they're happy. It's this award, it's this link here that's the most critical one. This tells you what the current awards are in this program. And that's super important to know. So we're going to click on this link. It's going to take us to some page. And this is a list of all of the NNA awards. So let's do this one by one. The important thing here to know is that there are 98 NNA awards currently active. And if you don't want to find the shortcut and you can remember 4-digit codes, there's an element code here that tells you that if you just type in element code 104Y, you'll find all of the NNA awards. Next here is a list of all of the states on the left, and you can imagine for something called Navigating the New Arctic, you'd expect a lot of them to be in Alaska, which is the case. There are 24 of them in Alaska, and everybody else is sort of onesies and twosies, maybe until you get to Washington, which is near Alaska, and Massachusetts, which is not near Alaska. I don't really know why there are a lot there. Maybe, oh, Woods Hole maybe has a lot. Okay, and then you could see what directorates they show up in and what the award sizes are. But the important thing to think about is here. So this is a list of the 98 awards broken up in groups of 30. And the thing to think about as new investigators or investigators applying to NSF for a particular program is not to look at these data this way. So you can sort them by relevance, that's how they come up, but what I'd like to do is sort them by start date, right? What time the award started. And then because there's 98 of them, let's go to the very end. So these are the most recent awards that have been made by NNA. Let's see, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's say there are 8 of them on this page. One to Sita Sistia, one to George Hambrecht, one to Margaret Darrow, one to Yang Xu, one to Xiang Chunzhen, one to Howard Epstein, one to Nicole Massardi, one to Susan Natali. Okay. The reason why you want to look at them chronologically is the following. The most recent awards are the ones that indicate where the program has just been, right? So if the program has evolved as a function of time, the most recent awards tell you what they're interested in currently. All right. So the first reason is it tells you where the program is. The second reason is a little more strategic. In the first part of the talk, we showed you the results from the success rate for careers, which depending on which agency you were at was, let's say, which directorate you were at was between 15 and 20%. So the information I have for you is that one of the worst parts of being a program officer is putting together panels. And the success rate for an NSF program officer to put together a panel, to call somebody and ask, will you serve on a panel, and have them accept, is about 1 in 5 also. Which means that if I want to put together a panel of 10 people to review NNA proposals, I probably have to call 50 people in order to make that happen. That's a huge pain in the butt. And to maximize your chances of success, who are the people who are most likely to accept your invitation to review proposals? Then let's say Nicole Massardi from the University of Alaska Fairbanks, who you just gave $973,000 to. So being able to look at this list of people who were just funded tells you first who you as a PI should talk to if you're interested in the program. If you know any of these people, talk to them and see what their proposal was like, what their thoughts were. But also, these people are prime candidates for showing up on panels to review your proposals, right? So this might apply, for example, to Track-4s. It definitely applies to careers. Program officers will always try to find recent career awardees to sit on panels with them, especially if they've just been funded. So being able to spend some time in the NSF Awards database, and it's something you should do. You shouldn't spend hours and hours of it in your office if you go into the office, but it's something to do, over a cup of coffee in the morning, to read a little bit, to just see, and then to be able to understand what that community looks like. All right, so I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint now. Okay, so analyzing the solicitation. So I've talked a little bit about solicitations. Um, I think when I was a faculty member, the first thing I would look at was to look straight at the budget section, see how many awards they were thinking of giving out, and how much money they had to try to calculate what my odds are. And I would say that that's a kind of three-dimensional chess that I'm no longer interested in playing. I would say that being able, your chances of funding are about 1 in 5. So being able to, your time is much better spent trying to guess who is applying, and you can do that through the database. Now, when I get a new solicitation, the thing I look at immediately is the back. So at the back end of every solicitation from NSF, there's a list of merit review criteria, and every NSF proposal has intellectual merit and broader impacts, but many of them have solicitation-specific criteria for evaluation, and this tells you exactly what the program is looking for. So as you read, make sure you read the whole thing, not just the intro part, but read the compliance checklist. Read all of the requirements. Read what they expect in the proposal. I'm going to try to mute whoever is. Can you? Oops. Can whoever is not muted mute, please? Thanks. Now I don't know how to go backwards. Oh, okay. And then as you read, start making lists. We'll show you, sorry, I don't have one on the slide deck, but I can certainly send you our checklist for career, for example. When you have questions, be able to identify what areas are unclear, because this is the foundation of a conversation with NSF afterwards. And then this last bullet point is what I do, which is I try to understand what the criteria are for evaluation. Okay, so we're going to take an example here. This is from a call called Major Research Instrumentation, MRI. MRI is a weird call. It's an instrumentation call that allows you to buy a large piece of equipment that will be used by you and your colleagues basically all the time. And they're usually things that don't fit onto startup or an individual investigator award. So the URL is up there, and the second bullet says, in this section, describe the specific research programs and research training activities that will be enabled and that drive the request for the desired instrumentation. And so what I'd like to do is unpack the sentences in this selection. This first sentence means that what you need to do is to go to each of your colleagues who would possibly need to use, let's say you're going to buy a spectrometer of some sort that will use that spectrometer, and talk to them and have them write you text that describes what they will do in terms of research and what they will do in terms of training. So they need to tell you both what the research is for that used for that spectrometer, as well as the students that will use it and how people will be trained. The next sentence says, also describe current and potential funding sources that may support these activities and how the instrument will better enable future funding support, which means that the people who you speak with ought to have current funding either from NSF or NIH or another agency, as well as they need to have a sentence in there that says, due to NSF's great generosity in allowing us to buy the spectrometer, we will be able to do the following measurements, and these measurements will allow us to chase this other opportunity at NSF. So, and then the next sentence says, in narrative or tabular form, describe personnel by research area and type anticipated to use and benefit from this instrument, which means that you need to start making tables and lists of everyone who's there, and you need to know, if we actually buy the spectrometer, there'll be 30 people in my department, 10 of whom are faculty, 20 of whom are graduate students who will be using this, and map out what the usage is like. So every sentence in a solicitation counts. Every sentence in the solicitation means that you need to be able to draw a line between that sentence and a specific task in constructing the proposal. Okay, so let's say you read your solicitation and you've got some questions and you want to talk to a program officer. So the first thing to think about is program officers, don't cold call them. They are pretty busy. They can be cranky. and they need to be guided in the discussion because they don't usually know you from anybody else unless you know them well. So the choreography for this task is very well established and has to do with being able to prep. Essentially, your job is to prep the program officer as much as possible so that the interaction is efficient for them. For NSF, that means, so for every agency, it means writing something that they're used to seeing. For NSF, it means writing something that looks like a project summary. So for NSF, suggestion is to prepare a one-pager that looks like a project summary. So it's got 3 sections. The first section is description of the project, and then the next 2 sections are a description of the intellectual merit and the broader impacts of the project. So write that piece of white paper. T.I.G regularly works with investigators to hammer this out and to make it nice. And then email it to the program officer to schedule, say, dear Dr. So-and-so, I'm thinking of your program, and I was thinking of submitting something along these lines. Here's a brief description. I have some questions, and I'd like to ask them to you, and here are the questions. Do you have time for a phone call? The in-person visit part was pre-COVID, and but I don't think anybody's going to do that for the next year or 2. And then NSF always says the program officer is not the panel, and that's definitely true. Panelists are people like you, but program officers are people like them. But at the same time, the program officer, any program officer worth their salt, knows what they've funded and what their program is about, and they ought to be able to give you guidance. In terms of contacting program officers, questions you can ask. So these questions actually come straight from NSF. Does my research objective fit well within your program? Sure, that's reasonable. What is your funding policy for career awards? So, I mean, if you've read the solicitation, you know that it's 400K, except if you're in bio or an OPP, then it's 500. But this 3rd bullet is probably important. How are career proposals submitted to your program reviewed? You want to understand who's going to read and what they're going to be looking for. And then I've talked briefly about joint review. Our recommendation is to not pursue this. I think you need to make a really compelling case and be confident that you will crush both panels rather than just crush one panel and get hammered by the second one. Okay, and then what can your program officer do? They can give you some advice. If you submitted previously and your proposal was declined, they can look at what the reviews were like and give you some understanding of what the panel was thinking about. I do not know a single program officer who's given people resources to write a better proposal next time, but a lot of program officers are genuinely interested in seeing you succeed, mostly because they'd rather have you in their office or on the phone happy than in their office and on the phone sad. So being able to help you is probably good. And again, the last bullet point is they know who they funded. So if your work sounds like something else they've funded, they can probably direct you to that person. You can also do that legwork for this last bullet on the database. Okay, so let's see. Let's talk a little bit about tools for managing the tasks. When TIG works with you, we construct a check sheet for every solicitation. It tells you what the page lengths are, what your section headers should be if they're specified. We'll help you with your bio sketches if you want. The main thing that we try to do is to establish a schedule for writing and drafts. And that's because too frequently we see people sort of pile in at the last minute. I'll give you an example that tomorrow is a major NSF deadline for a program called Coastlines and People. These proposals are taking about 6 months to a year to write. And NSF had a windup of about 2 years for Coastlines and People program. We have people asking whether or not we'll help them on their proposal as of yesterday evening. So 36 hours ahead of time. And, you know, the answer is usually we think you should be thinking about something else, but you should never put yourself voluntarily into that kind of a situation. Have a schedule, have it ready to upload a week ahead of time. I mean, you will never upload a week ahead of time, but have enough slack built into it so that when deadlines slip, when your chair goes away and can't write the letter, when your OSP closes down because of COVID, and everything is being processed more slowly, build in enough slack that not everything has to happen in a very clockwork-like way. And then think about who your point of contact should be within the sponsored research office. Having these are the people who ultimately push the button on whether or not your proposal gets submitted, and having them on your side is important. This is even more important if you have a multi-institutional proposal, because you have to do all of the routing and SRO work within their institutions also. So being able to build out the appropriate amount of time is critical. I want to give you, oh, okay, so here's what a success submission checklist looks like. We all know that you need a project summary and a project description, which is fine, but there are a lot of other things that need to go in here. So for a career, you need references, you need a biographical sketch. And for those of you who are new to NSF, well, maybe I don't need to say anything for those of you new to NSF. Those of you who are old to NSF, there's a new requirement for particularly formatted biosketch and current and pending. You have to either use their fillable forms or a web-based platform called SciEnv. We think that the NSF forms are probably more annoying to use, but make a better product at the end, but your own mileage may vary. If you're writing a career proposal, you definitely need a departmental letter. If you have collaborators, you need letters of collaboration. There is a horrible, horrible table at the beginning called Collaborators and Other Affiliations, or COA, which is the way of putting together a list of people who are conflicted with your proposal and shouldn't review. That itself is a terrible job to put together. You need a budget, which needs to have to go through your OSP. You need a budget justification. You need a postdoctoral mentoring plan and a data management plan. So it's not just writing 15 pages and then knocking off the project summary at the end. There's a lot of ancillary stuff that needs to get done in order to submit. We wanted to give you a timeline. This timeline is deliberately aggressive, and it's designed to make you start thinking about writing a career proposal, what you should be doing. So career proposals are next due on the 26th of July. And our suggestion is you should start writing in January. In January, so let's say, we all survive the fall semester, the third or fourth wave happens of COVID, and you're holed up over the winter break and you're starting to write. We think January is the right time to start writing your white paper. And to work, we'd be happy to work with you on it, to discuss and to set you up so that you can discuss your ideas with NSF program staff. We also think it's a great time in January to start having the conversations with people who are in charge of the educational components of what you want to do and the broader impact pieces. And then in February, assuming that we're all back on campus in February, it's a good time to discuss your ideas with your chair, to be able to indicate, I've talked to NSF about this, and here's what they thought, and here's where I'm going with my career proposal, and to warn your chair that they're going to be responsible for writing a letter, and then you'll help them draft it. Then in March, we think it's a great time to have your first rough draft done. When you work with TIG, or if you work with TIG, we try to get involved very early on in this game. And that's simply because if there are course corrections that need to happen with the proposal, they should happen early on and not at the last minute. So our usual phrase is we like to see something early and ugly rather than later and more refined. And then that'll take you a month to do. And then you're, as you show it to your colleagues and hammer out ideas and finish things off, a second rough draft in April. By May, so at the beginning of May, not at the end of May, if you've never written an NSF proposal before, there's a registration process. We recommend nailing the budget in May. If you work with TIG, we'll send your proposal out for external review in May. Your chair letter ought to be nailed down by then, and all of the other ancillary docs ought to be nailed down in May. And my intention of putting May here is just to say you should start this at the beginning of May, not the day after graduation. June is finalizing the draft. If you become incredibly detail oriented towards the end of this proposal, it will take you weeks to finalize a draft. It's not just making sure it looks okay. You're interested in having us read it. You're interested in having your colleagues read it. It could be interesting to have your, let's say, postdoctoral advisor or grad advisor read it. And then these two deadlines here actually come from NSF. So NSF's deadline for the proposal is the 26th. NSF is actually encouraging people to submit on the 19th. And then they say, have it ready to route to your sponsored research office a week before that. So 12th of July, so right before Bastille Day, have it ready to go. And then a week early, they want you to submit. So out of all of the dates on this, none of these dates are start doing this after you submit your grades for the spring semester. We want you to start now, or January, let's say. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is reviewers. Your reviewers are you. So reviewers get called by NSF to review proposals, and you are absolutely delusional if you think that they're going to give you a fair read. They're going to clear off their desk, they're going to print out your proposal, and they're going to sit there and, you know, have had a good night's sleep and drink their coffee and be able to clear their minds and read. They are people like you, like most of us. They're, you know, working out of their home. They have their kid who's, I don't know, on high school doing Zoom meetings. You know, there's not a rush on toilet paper, but they're certainly worried about what's going on in the world. And so there are a lot of things competing for their attention. In addition to that, people aren't asked to read just one proposal. They're asked to read 10. And therefore, there are a lot of things competing for their time. To do a fair read on a proposal, on a 15-page proposal, takes a couple of hours. If they have to read 10 of them, that's going to take them 4 days. So, so just know who your reviewers are. The second thing here is reviewers are asked specific questions, and you can figure out what those questions are by reading the solicitation. So the merit review section tells you the questions that they're being asked. And it's really important to be able to tell them what they need to know. Reviewers are stressed, reviewers are tired, reviewers have to respond to a grid, a battery of questions, and being able to help them in that job gives you a much better chance of having the review be positive than if they have to hunt through an entire document to find a particular thing they need to answer. So the way to think about this is you need to know what they are supposed to be asked, and you need to make sure they can respond appropriately. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to write the answer down so they can cut and paste it into a form. The way to think about this is sometimes you need to be able to cut the food into small pieces, stick the fork into the food, and wave it in front of their mouths in order to get them to write the review that you want them to. So that's the thing to keep in mind. That much said, let's talk about merit review criteria. So I've mentioned for career, intellectual merit and broader impacts, and then some have solicitation specific review criteria. But I wanted to talk about what IM and BI mean. So each IM and BI have 5 subcomponents. The first one depends on whether or not your intellectual merit or broader impacts, but it says, you know, what is the potential to advance knowledge and understanding within the field or across different fields, which is for intellectual merit, or to benefit society or advance desired societal outcomes, which is broader impacts. So the IM and the BI pieces here are things that you need to specifically address. Every NSF proposal is required to have a statement about broader impacts in it now. It used to be that you had to have also a statement about intellectual merit within the project description, but that was removed this year. but you should probably say the intellectual merit of this project is the ability to advance, and then describe what you're going to do that that will advance the field. In terms of the next bullets, the next one is, to what extent do proposed activities suggest and explore creative, original, or potentially transformative concepts? So this bullet is asking, what are you doing that is novel? It can't just be, I think this is a good idea and it fits in with everything else that's been done in the field. You need to explicitly call out, the innovative thing that I am doing is this. And you need to do it for both the research piece as well as the education piece. The next bullet is the plan for carrying out the proposed activities well-reasoned, well-organized, and based on a sound rationale? So this one is the implementation one, right? This is, do you know what you're doing? Do you have an idea? And can you convince us that you've thought this through all the way through for both the research and the education piece? Does the plan incorporate a mechanism to assess success? So in career proposals, we've been seeing more and more reviews come back, especially in career, where an evaluation plan of both the education as well as the research components are expected by the reviewers. So being able to indicate that is, indicate that you have a mechanism for evaluating is important. Another way of thinking about this bullet point is to be able to have a Gantt chart that details when, not by month or something like that, but say like by half year or by year, what activities are going to happen when. The fourth bullet is, how well qualified is the individual team organization to conduct the proposed activities? So if you're a algebraic topologist, a mathematician, and you want to do some environmental research, you need to be able to indicate how what you're doing fits within your wheelhouse. And then finally, are there adequate resources available? So usually this comes off really stilted in proposals. They'll say, Professor X has all of the things in their lab in order to carry this out, except for this particular spectrometer that they're going to buy at the beginning of the proposal. But be able to address all of these criteria. Okay, so given those statements of what the reviewers are being asked to look for, I figured we'd spend some time talking about what a project description looks like. The project description should really be a very mercenary document. A lot of the times, the project descriptions that we read from people who are writing their first proposal are terrible. And they're terrible because they have this long introduction about what you want to do and why it's important. But you don't start from that. You start from, 300 years ago when the microscope was first invented, people did this, that, and the other thing. And you got to remember that the reviewers are really tired and they've got to read so many of these. They just want to know what you're going to do. So tell them what you're going to do, provide a lot of details, and provide that context in the very beginning. So our recommendation is in the first half of the first page, don't give me a long introduction about why, some history of something. Just say, this project is about X. We are going to do the following thing. We are guided by this overarching science question, and that leads to these hypotheses. Our project is super important because we have developed a novel technique for doing this, that, and the other thing. And I am the best person to do this because I have the unique training in both understanding, make something up, condensed matter physics and biophysics in this particular set of proteins. So the way of thinking about it is nothing in what we've done as scholars and teachers up to this point has really prepared us for this, right? When you write a paper, there's a long narrative arc that we all know about. There's an introduction section, and then methods and materials, and then results and discussion and conclusion. That's being taught to kids today in chemistry classes in high schools. So, and that is precisely not what you want to do here. You want to make it so that it's incredibly efficient for people to understand what you want to do. It doesn't have to be beautiful prose. Nobody has ever gone back to an NSF proposal and said, I really love the rhetorical flourishes and witty remarks that this person made in their proposal. Use short sentences and make it concise, make it easy to read. Be as quantitative as you can. Don't say things are considerably different or significantly difficult or something like that. You know, if you're going to drive dramatic change in the number of underrepresented minorities that are participating, say, I'm going to hire 10 African-American, I'm going to hire 10 graduate students, and, you know, we're going to specifically target African-Americans from HBCUs as well as other underrepresented minorities from SACNAS. So give as many numbers as you can. The goal here is to be able to convey to the reviewer that you have thought everything out. Okay, so what should a career proposal look like? I really hate putting up numbers like this, mostly because you're guaranteed that these numbers are wrong. Every career proposal is going to look different. But if I had to, you know, create some fantasy proposal, it might look the following way. I would spend half a page on the big picture. So the big picture here is what you're going to do, why it's important, what your overall research question is. Because this is a career proposal, it should have a statement about why you are, you know, what your career goals are as a teacher scholar, and why this particular proposal project fits into what you want to do 10 years from now. There's an intro to the material showing that demonstrates that you have background knowledge, you're an expert in the field, you're aware of what's going on. You should specifically craft this introduction with the expectation that somebody in the field is going to read your proposal and will be angry if you don't cite their work. The research plan itself should have hypotheses and goals. And this means that you should avoid words like discover and avoid words like explore. You should make it absolutely bone dry clear that you know precisely what's going to happen all throughout. So you need hypotheses and you need goals that that test those hypotheses. And you can't spend all 15 pages on it, but you should spend about half the pages on that. Then we need an educational plan, and that should be as large as you can make it. Your educational plan should start with what the goals are for your educational plan and have explicit statements that talk about how it's integrated with the research component. Your broader impacts piece should be about a page. Half a page is way too short, and I don't think you can afford to spend 2 pages on anything for broader impact. So coupled with the educational plan, a broader impact statement is probably not a bad thing. And then the last 1.5 pages is management, timetable, evaluation, and results from prior NSF support. So management is not something that you may have been used to thinking about as a faculty member, but it means many things here. Again, the goal is to convince the staff that you know what you're doing, right? So to be able to indicate how frequently you're going to talk to collaborators, how frequently you're going to have group meetings with grad students and postdocs. Timetable, we've mentioned a Gantt chart. Evaluation means being able to articulate, you don't need an external evaluator for a career, but being able to articulate what the year-on-year goals are for all 5 years for both the research piece and the education piece, and how you will figure out whether or not you're meeting those goals. So it could be a colleague, it could be a mentor that you'd explain these, you know, your progress on the report to. Several career proposals we've seen have had external advisory boards for a faculty member's career proposal, and that has worked. So reviewers have liked that. And then finally, the results from prior NSF support. This last piece can be as short or as long as you want it to be, but we'd recommend short. The goal here is not to describe the work so that the reviewers think that it's great. The goal is to describe the work to acknowledge NSF support as well as demonstrate that you know what you're doing. Okay, so a couple of tips. Hallmarks of career proposals. Career proposals are not research proposals. Career proposals are some weird hybrid between a research proposal and a career development plan. And one of the things you need to be able to do is to be able to map out what's going to happen over the next 5 years and portray who you're going to be as a researcher and an educator. You need to be able to tell the reviewers what your career vision is And you need to have you need two things. One, you need to be unique. So I'm sure that those of you who have been thinking about this have asked your colleagues for copies of career proposals, and that's great. I mean, that will give you an existence proof of what has worked in the past, but your proposal will be different. Your own boundary conditions are different, and the things that you care about are different. But all career proposals need to have some sort of very big picture question in terms of what you want to do with your career, and then to be able to describe how this 5-year project fits in there. You need to be able to describe why you are the best person to do this work. So it can't just be that you have a good idea, but if I'm a condensed matter physicist and I have a person who I was also in grad school with, who's also a condensed matter physicist at another university, why is this project the best for me to do, right? If they could just replace me with this other person, then it's not good enough. You need to be unique. You need to be able to stand out from the rest of the people who are here. So being able to spend time now thinking about what your research project should be for career is probably some of the best time that you can spend to have a strong payoff afterwards. And then the final thing I would say is to come back to this idea of integration of research and education. Integration of research and education is an issue in many NSF proposals, but it's especially important for career. And so again, here it says, exemplify the role of teacher scholars through outstanding research, excellent education, and integration of education and research within the context of the mission of their organizations. The usual way we try to get people to think about this is, you are all assistant professors, right? You're within the first 5 or 6 years of being assistant professor. At the end of those 5 or 6 years, you're going to write a packet, a whole bunch of stuff that you have to show to your colleagues in your department, the tenure and promotion committees, your dean, the provost, that declares, I should be given tenure and promoted to associate professor because I did the following cool things that nobody else can do. And here are my contributions, not just to the university, but to science and to the community. So that's what you should be thinking about, but we want you to think a little beyond that, right? Don't just think what happens at the end of 5 years. Think about 10 years from now. So 10 years from now, you're putting together that exact same packet, but for promotion to full. And in that packet, you again need to be able to declare, what mark you have made, not just at the departmental and the university, but in the community. And that's what we want you to think about. So being able to paint that picture, in 10 years, I'm going to be the person who understands the role of, ligand binding in heme proteins across all of the oxygenation proteins in your blood. Being able to articulate that, and then to say, the first step in doing that is to do this particular career project. That's what we want you to think about. So you need to be able to articulate sort of where you want to be in terms of a lifetime of leadership in education and research. And so things to think about. You're required to have integration of research education for careers. You need to be able to understand and articulate how your education components will be assessed. You need to talk about how the research, explicitly talk about how the research impacts the educational goals, and vice versa, how the educational goals impact the research. And you cannot, so there's a sniff test here. You can't just win by throwing everything at the wall and see what sticks. So you need to be able to really pick out a couple of high quality activities. Very frequently what we see with overambitious proposals in career, especially on the education piece, the comments we'll get comments on one side of the spectrum or the other. On the overambition side, we'll see, this cannot possibly happen because the individual will be spending 0.8 of their 1.0 FTE just doing outreach. On the other hand, the other side of the spectrum is the kiss of death, is the comment that says the activities that are being proposed are what is normally expected of any assistant professor, and not really worthy of career. So being able to strike that fine line there is important. So the suggestion is the following: find one novel, high-impact education activity, a centerpiece project that is super cool. This is the main focus of your educational stuff. And then you can complement that by doing the other things that everybody else is doing. Everybody is going to teach a class. Everybody's going to take their research and put it into a graduate course. Everybody's going to have a graduate seminar. Everybody's going to do that. What we're looking for is, our recommendation is rather, is to have something super cool that's extra shiny that people will remember when they're discussing proposals. You know, you'll have to do everything else too, but to have one thing that makes you stand out. The thing that you do needs to be evidence-based. Okay, so you can't just say, I'm going to do this because I think it's a good idea. You need to be able to back up the idea that you have by showing that you're familiar with pedagogy, right? And how learning happens among students, or the best practices for mentoring or broadening participation. So don't make anything anecdotal, have everything referenced. Okay, and then there are a couple of resources. I won't read any of these off to you. There are definitely institutions out there that have spent a lot of time putting together resources for integration of research and education. There's Carleton, something out of University of Georgia, Berkeley, and there are a couple of journal articles. What's important here? Oh, I'm not sure I need to read any of this to you. This is just simply the things that research and education panelists look for. They're looking for the synergy among the activities, they're looking for how they interact with the research, and they're looking to make sure that there's integration across them. Okay, so that's the end of the career piece. I've basically used up my time, but I'm happy to take questions. And I think there might be one in the, oh, there's one in the quotes here in the chat. Would you comment about the cost of involving T.I.G? Initially, Mel mentioned that 75% of the cost is paid by South Dakota EPSCoR and the rest is by University Research Office. Is that correct? I think that's correct, but maybe Mel is the right person to answer this. If so, when do I have to let South Dakota EPSCoR and University OSP know about the arrangement? I don't know. We would be happy to talk to you anytime, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Mel, maybe you can address that question. Or not. So Tula, I don't have the answer to your question. We'd be happy to work with you, and we'd be happy to work with Mel. Oh, here's Mel.
Oh, okay. So what you just, I would suggest if you're interested in doing that, contact your research office, on your campus, and also myself or Marcy at the EPSCoR office. And then the other component of that would be you have to work with Kelvin and T.I.G to agree on the schedule for doing the review and so forth. So, you know, Kelvin provided a general overview or schedule for a career proposal. But if you're doing that for career or any of the other applications, you know, you would have to agree to a certain schedule so that obviously they have time for the review and so forth. And I'm just reading the text to see if I answered that.
Tula, does that sound like it addressed your question?
One other thing I'll mention here, Kelvin, is as part of the workshop, any of the participants can provide a one-page summary, I guess, or the little white paper that you talked about, and then have a 30-minute, I guess, discussion with Kelvin of that in terms of suggestions and so forth. And so if you know, we could either do that and just defer this a little bit to Kelvin, in which we set a specific day, in later in November or early December for people to do that and then schedule those, or we could probably potentially even be a little more flexible depending on the programs you're going after and the deadlines potentially.
Absolutely. So we'd love to be able to discuss your ideas and to offer suggestions for positioning. I think I recognize that I failed to put my email address on the slide deck, and I'll amend that and send a new set of slides to South Dakota EPSCoR for dissemination. But we're certainly happy to have those conversations. Are there other questions?
I've got one.
Can I put my email in the chat? Yeah, I can definitely do that. So.
So Kelvin, I've got an idea for my broader impacts for how to kind of broaden participation with Native Americans, but as a middle-class white male, I am not uniquely situated to do that on my own. And so in order to be successful there, I think, it would need a significant amount of collaboration and cooperation with members of that community. And I know, for a career proposal, you're supposed to highlight yourself and the things that you will do. And I certainly would be involved in that. But I guess, could you speak to the balance there between, trying to highlight yourself and trying to, work with the people who you need to work with in order to be realistically, have a chance of success at something like that?
Sure. So that's a great question, Scott. I think the first thing to do is to demonstrate situational awareness, which you have. So to understand that those interactions, the interactions between you and members of indigenous populations or tribal colleges are delicate, need to be approached with tact and respect. That's an incredibly important thing to acknowledge in the proposal. People who are reading specifically for that kind of broadening participation aspect will be looking for that. I think it's a measure of humility that you recognize that you need other people to help you with this process, and therefore being able in the proposal to describe the strategic value of that individual and how they were chosen, as well as how that will enable you to reach your educational goals, your broader impacts goals, as well as your goals as a teacher scholar in the state of South Dakota, I think is the way to go. I'd say when you asked your question though, I would say it's a subset of questions involving bringing other people in. So I'd like to just be able to describe that, when I first started as an assistant professor, I knew what I knew, right? I knew what I learned as a grad student. I knew what I learned as a postdoc. I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't have everything that I needed skill-wise in order to go after that. So being able to have a collaborator who provides essentially a service for you and being able to identify first that you recognize that you need something. Second, you've found the person who can help you with it. Third, that you can work with them to gain something, whether it's with broadening participation or with research techniques or anything. I think being able to do that is important. Usually the questions are asked from the opposite direction, which is so let me say it a different way. Our recommendation whenever you bring anybody in is to be able to draw a very bright line between what you are doing and what they bring to the project. So yes, you're absolutely right. You need to focus on you. This is your career and you're writing to convince them to give you money. But it's okay to say, in order to get this done, I need this person who will do this very well-defined thing for me, right? And I will handle everything else. So bring the person in. I think that's great. I think in particular, because of the sensitive nature of the broadening participation, it's critical to do that. And I think it's actually to your benefit to articulate that in the in the proposal, and then to be able to define precisely what that person will do is the way to do it. Does it make sense?
It does. Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Are there some other questions?
Yeah. Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt, Kelvin. I'd just like to add one thing to that, your response to Scott there. I would encourage, especially when you're working with the tribal communities and faculty there, to do that early, and build that relationship with them rather than trying to do it in the last month or something like that. Because it's important to do that. And and from the EPSCoR office, we have partnerships, which you know, with all the 3 tribal colleges and people there, so we can certainly help facilitate connections and introductions if that's helpful for you.
Thank you.
I think that's great advice, Mel. Every tribal college, Alaskan Native Village, Native Hawaiian group that we have ever worked with, HBCU, they realize that there are incentives for faculty to work with them, and they're super tired of being just the person of color who gets stapled into the proposal at the last minute. So being able to have an actual relationship that lasts beyond the bottom half of the last paragraph of the last page of the proposal, I think, is really important. Are there other questions that we can answer? I've put my email address and cell phone number into the chat, and I'm happy to talk to you as you require later on. Any other questions? Okay, Mel, what happens next?
Well, I don't know. We're a little bit ahead of time. So I'm looking here to see if our panelists, I asked them to join us by 11:30.
Okay.
I don't think either of them have joined us. So we can either take a break for 5 minutes or so, or perhaps somebody has a question or two, and hopefully they'll join us at 11:30.
Okay, well, I will stay on and be happy to field questions. And if you want to take a break and wait for the 11:30 to begin, that's great, but I'll just be here.
I will. First off, let me thank you, Kelvin, for doing the workshop here. I know this isn't the ideal way to do it via Zoom, but I appreciate that. I also thank everybody who participated here for participating. And as we talked about, if you need a recording or want to access that, and I know you have Marcy Olson's email address, so she can provide that recording to you if you do need that or want it for a reason or another. Also, just a reminder about if you choose, and even if it's not a career proposal or track 2 or track 4 proposal, but if you plan to submit an MRI or some other proposal, NSF proposal, we can also work with your institution to have T.I.G and Kelvin do and others there, TIG help with the review of that proposal as well. So again, I think if you are interested in doing that and having him do that, probably the best thing for you to do would be to demand, irrespective of the program you're going for, send me an email and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this and would like to have a review. And then I can connect, or we can work with your research office on that, and then also connect with Kelvin to get the things laid out there. I see Travis. Well, first off, any questions regarding that?
I have a question for the group. So this is simply a question on my end. Pre-COVID, I would get on a plane and fly out to Sioux Falls or wherever, Brookings, and talk to a room full of people. And now that we all live in this COVID world for the next 18 months at least, one of the things that we've been thinking about on this end is flipping the classroom, which is, instead of having me be live here, to send a recording and then have the time that we spend together be just focused on questions. I know from my previous lives that flipping the classroom is something that I was, as a physics professor, was encouraged to do for lectures. From your point of view, would that be useful, or a more useful way of conveying information, so that you could, for example, view a recording of this and then we could meet afterwards and talk? Everybody's off getting coffee. Why not start a Slack channel? Sure, we could have done that. We could do that also. Okay, well, that was my question, Mel.
Okay. I mean, just personally, I know 3 hours or 4 hours on Zoom can be tedious, but I would say that I think this format is more, at least for me, beneficial than watching a recording and then doing some questions. But
yeah, okay.
That's just my point of view.
No, I understand.
Yeah, especially now, if with people who have questions or comments, they've gone through this, but they could schedule again, a 30-minute discussion, and which you can get very in depth with their specific project or proposal as well. So I think, hopefully people will take advantage of that opportunity.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, our two panelists have joined us here, so I think we are going to, I'm going to go ahead and introduce them, and then they will talk a little bit about their experience. Travis Walker, as you heard previously, has a career proposal or project, And I'm not going to say this. Winquin Wu, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. I'm sorry. Has a Track-4 project, which he'll talk a little bit about the projects and then also their experience in, the submission, but also execution of the projects. So with that, how about Travis? If you're ready, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Mel. And thanks for inviting me to serve on this panel. I'm really here to answer questions that you may have more than anything, but I can give you a little bit of background about me. I'm an alumni from South Dakota School of Mines, started here, Chemie and Applied Mathematics, went to Stanford, got my PhD there, went straight out of my PhD at Stanford to an assistant professor position at Oregon State University. Started applying for grants right away, trying to do the single PI thing as much as possible. Had my eyes set on the career award, submitted once, I think it was in 2015, I can go look, and was denied, got some good feedback back. Then submitted again the next year. As part of that second submission, I participated in a grant writing workshop. That was an ongoing thing throughout the semester. Although I don't know if that helped my my science at all, I think it did help me figure out how to speak to the reviewers in a way that they could get across my idea, so I can answer some questions about that. And was funded in my second attempt in 2016. I mean, I think this is better if I can get some questions from people on what they want to learn from this, but I'd be happy to talk more if later, if necessary.
Why don't we go? Yeah, any questions for Travis?
I don't have a specific question, but one of the biggest things I'm hoping to get out of this workshop is just a better understanding of, how to integrate that kind of bidirectional relationship between the research and the teaching. So if you could speak to how you approached that, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I'll relay some messages that I was told, and then I'll give you some of my personal experience. So I had basically 3 aims in my proposal, 2 of them being research oriented, and one of them being an educational platform that I proposed. The thing that I was told when I was starting my path was that the educational piece will not win you the award, but it can certainly lose you the award. Now that's what I was told, and during my first attempt, I think that became apparent. I was told that the educational piece was very good, and that I needed to work on the science piece. So I do agree that it's not going to win you the award, but you could lose it that way, and I've seen that with other people. So the real question I think that you should ask is, how do you not lose the award due to a faulty educational platform? And the advice that I was given when I came in, and I share this advice with everybody that I meet, and I think this is really good advice, which is don't reinvent the wheel. When I got to Oregon State, I found myself interacting a lot with a man named Skip Rochfort, who is the executive director of pre-college programs at Oregon State. And they do an extensive amount of outreach at OSU that they had already built up. They had already, figured out the right way to do these kind of things. And so what I did is I plugged right into the existing infrastructure, and I just started participating. And the nice thing that I think in my award on the educational side is that I could point out directly to all of these different things that I had already been participating in, and tell the reviewers, look, we do this whether you're going to give us this award or not, and we're looking to take these monies and expand upon things that we're already doing. So showing that track record, I think, is really important, but doing it in a way that you don't come in and say, hey, I'm gonna, reinvent the entire wheel. I helped mentor a faculty member that came in, and she had this idea to build this huge 1 week long outreach program where she was going to bring in 1,000 teachers from around Oregon and put them, teach them how to go back and teach science. And all these ideas she had was great, except for the fact that she was going to have to devote that much time to doing it. And it would have been a huge effort to get that going. Whereas we already had programs in place that she could come in and plug right into and interact with the teachers in the way that she wanted, delivering the same curriculum without having to organize the entire event. So my suggestion to you, everybody on here and everybody I talk to, is go around your institution, find the people that are already doing outreach, plug into their systems, and develop modules on your topics that you can then take to these outreach events and test them out. Because you'll find out pretty quickly whether they're working or not. You can go home, you can readjust them, and then you have something to talk about in your educational platform part. So that's my big advice on how to integrate the educational platform. If you have more specific questions, I'd be happy to talk about what I was doing, but
I think that's great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Kelvin, did you have one?
No, I think it's been answered, but I would just follow up with Travis. So so you received your career award at Oregon State and then came to South Dakota?
yes.
And so after that happened, let's see, did you end up serving on panels or?
For the NSF?
Yeah.
I have not served on a panel yet.
Okay. And finally, does your institution, so it looks like you're at Mines, does your institution have a similar long, several month long program for training people to write careers?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I haven't seen that be promoted or anything here. I think that it would be a very good investment for people to participate in. And I could, give you the name of the people that did it, but there's probably numerous different organizations that do these things. But the idea is that we met, they went through kind of teaching us how they would go about the whole idea. They sent us home with homework.
Mm-hmm.
The homework was not done in person, so we would write up like a 1-page, the first page. So he really stressed the first two pages, he said, was most important: the summary that you had to put together and the first page of the actual project description. And so we really focused all of our efforts on that first page of the project description, sent that out to him. He gave us edits and sent them back to us. And then we would get together periodically as a group, not that often, but periodically as a group, and we would share them with our peers, and they would then break them apart. So it wasn't always just one person doing all this editing. I think we could do something along those lines, even if it is hiring someone to kind of oversee it that has more experience. But it's that peer, the thing that you have to remember about a career award is it's a little different than these sort of single PI awards that you're going after, where you're going to get a content expert to be able to review exactly what you're doing, and they know your language and they know what you're going to be doing. They have a general idea whether you're going to be successful or not. You're going to have to convince a more broad audience inside of the reviewer panel whether or not what you're proposing is actually a good idea and whether or not they should fund you, right? So if you can convince your peers, even I'm in chemical engineering, go into a mechanical engineering, hand it to a mechanical engineer and say, here's my idea. Would you read my 1-page, my first page of my proposal, and can you give me feedback on whether or not you understand what's trying to go on here? I think that can be a really big win.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, to be able to convince one of your colleagues who's not in your discipline but scientifically literate that you've got an exciting, cool idea. I think that's definitely the thing to push for. Thanks.
Any other
Travis?
questions? Oh, go ahead, somebody.
This is Shankar. So is the science component in career proposals different from regular NSF proposals, the way you write and present the ideas?
So this absolutely is different because the career proposal is one of two that I know of inside of the NSF that is funding the person almost more than the project. The other one being the NSF Graduate Research Fellowship Program. Those are the two. And NSF, I think, has said that aloud to me in the past. The thing that you really have to think about is if I apply for a single PI, 3 year, $300,000 award, they want to fund that project. That's the project that they want to fund, and that's exactly what they're going to do, whether or not they give it to you or not. When they go to fund a career award, you know, this is a 5-year proposal. There is obviously the project component that they're looking to make sure that you have this science side to you, but they also want to see the educational platform. They want to see how those mesh together. And they also want to see your long range vision on how this startup monies, if you want to think about this early career monies, is going to enable you to push up into future work in your group down the line that is going to make you successful in the long run. At least that's what I've been able to interpret. So to me, those are different in how you sell it, right? Instead of just selling your project, you're selling you and your idea making and your educational platform and your research platform and how they all fit together.
I see there's a question in the chat, but I'm not, how a postdoctoral researcher connect teaching research for the proposal?
Yeah, that's okay. I can answer that.
Oh, okay.
We'll volunteer doing the same sort of things that I was just talking about. Everywhere you are, people are having to do outreach, having to do STEM, you know, outreach in some sense. Find ways to participate in those. They're often happening on the nights or weekends and you know, outside of your normal work hours, and find ways to participate. If you could show that track record, and people are going to look at you and say, okay, you're a postdoc. You don't have necessarily as much opportunity to define what you're going to do, but you know, if you could go in and participate in events that are already happening, I think that you can set up that track record as you go into your faculty position.
Any other questions for Travis? Well, Travis, thank you, but hope maybe you can stay on for us in case somebody comes up with another, has another question here in a few minutes.
No problem.
Wenquin, are you ready to go with talk a little bit about your Track-4?
Yes. So I will also went through myself bio a little bit. So I went to UCLA for physics PhD, and after 4 years of postdoc, I came to USD, and I actually did one of those individual PI and got funded with NSF. But I didn't try career award because I cannot find an existing program to plug myself in terms of teaching and outreach. So I feel like I don't have the ideas and efforts to satisfy those requirements for the career award. So I feel barely qualified to be on the panel, but what I did is to apply for the Track-4. Yes, and I'm glad to share some of the specifics of my experience with this one. So if you go to the next page, yeah, so this is a fellowship, so you're supposed to go and visit a host site. In my case, it's Los Alamos National Laboratory, where I have existing collaborators actually. The project is very general. It's about developing radiation techniques, combining two type of radiation techniques. Some of you may be familiar with this. Scintillator is very generally used, and the solid state is another very widely used detection technique. So we want to combine these two not because we invented this, because this is what a proposed project will do. And this is called the nudging project. It will operate a lot of such solid state germanium detectors inside the liquid argon scintillator detector. So that's what I'm plugging myself into. This nudging project is trying to develop a big neutrino-less double band decay experiment. So it's about a neutrino. If you go to the next slide, I here emphasize a little bit on the key scientific background, because I think this is the most important component of my proposal, actually, not anything else, but the scientific background. It is the so-called neutrino-less double band decay is a high priority, essentially, for nuclear science. For good reasons, we believe it does occur, but never found it. So it's going to be a discovery of the Nobel Prize for sure. If somebody actually discover it, it will violate fundamental physics laws, which again, we believe should happen. And it is about neutrinos, and this neutrino is also the key subject of the $1 billion DUNE project. If you are in South Dakota, you probably have heard of DUNE and Stanford Lab. This is really a $1 billion project focused on neutrino. So neutrino is high priority for physics, and this neutrino double band decay is a priority for basic physics of nuclear physics, essentially. This is recognized by the community, and it's actually formalized by this nuclear science advisory committee. And this committee is not just a bunch of scientists, it's actually chartered under the federal law to provide guidance. So can you please go to the next slide? So yeah, so what I'm saying that this science background is very formal, is really aligned with the agencies. Although nudging is one of the proposed experiments, not is maybe the one chosen, maybe not. Still, it is important by itself enough. So can you go to the next slide? Yeah. So back to my project, I do advance existing partnership by going to Los Alamos. That was not an issue, apparently. What I have in this project is really highly aligned with the scientific priority, with the community. I think the reviewers also recognize, every review recognize that. And just like Travis said, I think here in Track-4, you also sell yourself a little bit, because they wanted to support the PIs to have non-lasting impacts. They wanted the PIs to be potentially transferred to new directions. I personally have been using one type of detector, but not the other type. So this will allow me to transfer my expertise. So the new technology proposed in this project has these three advantages, and especially it is highly aligned with the formally recognized priority of the community. I think that's probably the most important component of my proposal. So yeah, that's what I have.
Any questions on the Track-4?
I have lots of questions. So Wen-Chin, how much time are you spending at Los Alamos?
Right, so that's a key and a very good question. No, there are travel bans, essentially, travel restrictions rather. So I haven't been able to actually start the project, which has been, yeah. So if you can, yeah, people throughout the DOE has been just encouraging travels, but there are exceptions. So I cannot elaborate exactly what is being allowed, what is not, but I have not been allowed to visit.
Okay. What was your plan though?
Yeah, so waiting, I mean, you know, I have communicated with my program manager. I will do that again in the annual report and talk about perhaps next year, you know, if situation will be better. It will get worse before it gets better, but hopefully it will get better next year. So the execution is not very successful at this point due to the pandemic.
Thank you.
I have a quick question now. Just briefly, the process, because there's a limitation on how many, in your case, the University of South Dakota Track-4 proposals can be submitted. Just talk a little bit about that process. I presume it wasn't. Did you have to go through some type of a competition on the campus, or were there not that?
There is a pre-selection, internal selection. I actually think I tried twice. The first time I was not chosen by the university to be one of the few, but the next time I got the opportunity to make the submission. Of course, the university has internal reviews or maybe even external ones and looks at it holistically, right, based on the merit of the project and the position of the PI.
I see a couple of questions in the chat. I mean, I can refer to the one. We could certainly, if there's interest, we can certainly sponsor a more general NSF proposal writing, Zoom, or even if, Kelvin talked about a different format, potentially doing that. And we can certainly, I'd welcome your suggestions, and then we can put something together for this year to help people prepare their proposals. And I'm going to let somebody else respond to Tula there.
Yeah, I think the question is likely to be for me, because I will visit some group. So indeed, the group I'm going to visit has been doing this type of research. They have a head start. That is actually why I can justify going there. Right? You go to some post lab because they either have the unique infrastructure or unique expertise. So in the case here, the group has been doing this work. It's unique in the sense that it's one of the very few groups doing this in the US. Our European colleagues, well, it's an international collaboration. Our European colleagues have been doing this, but in the US, the autonomous group has started doing that. They have a head start. It makes sense for me to visit there and contribute and learn from them. So I think actually that is an important aspect. I actually did my postdoc with that group, so it's not a new collaboration partnership at all, and they were okay with it because the group there has the expertise. Actually, in the physics department at USD, we had another faculty member been awarded this Track-4 as well, and in his case, I'm sure the host lab also has been doing this work. So I think it is a common thing that your host group have been doing this and has expertise.
Can I follow up on that question? So when we were discussing Track-4s earlier, there was a question as to whether or not you can go back, if you can ever go back home. And so in your proposal, Wenchen, did you have to do some special, did you have to do some fancy footwork to say, yes, this is where I came from, but they are the only people? Did you have to defend?
I think I did just a little bit, not much at all. I basically, of course, said this is where I did my postdoc, but I didn't do this type of work when I was a postdoc there. So this is really an entire new technique for us, and people have been began to do this just recently due to this proposed big project. So there is a gap, if you like, a buffer between what I did then and what I proposed to do. So, but that's it. Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a quick question for you. Since there are other colleagues in your department there that had Track-4s, did you, did they help you in
Oh
terms?
yeah, I mean,
of
yeah,
reviewing
there are,
and
yeah, there are. Sorry for interrupting your question, but yeah, they helped me certainly. They talked with me how they went about proposing. They talked about the projects and what are the expectations for the host lab, those kind of things. Yeah. One common feature in physics, nuclear and particle physics, is that our collaborations are often hundreds of people to begin with, sometimes thousands of people. So you don't really have fresh collaborators. You're probably always going to go to somewhere where you already have collaborators. So that was a concern because you always advance existing partnership, not brand new. And my colleagues at physics basically let me know that's okay. So that was just one example, but certainly they have guided me through the process, and I benefited a lot.
I have a question maybe for Travis or Kelvin. You know, broader impacts obviously are a significant part of the career proposal. And typically they're, I assume, they're education related. But for example, Scott Wood has, you know, some, you know, he's been through the EPSCoR program and so forth in terms of, so potentially developing a new product that has impacts. Is that something that can be discussed or should be discussed in the proposal?
So maybe I'll make a quick comment and Kelvin can answer. I don't think that broader impacts are restricted to only your educational impact. I definitely talked a lot about my educational impact and my K-20 public outreach stuff in my broader impacts, but I'm looking at my project description right now and there's a half page there on broader impacts of the science.
Right.
So I would back up everything Travis just said. Broader impacts are defined really as two categories. One is how you're going to impact the rest of the science around you. That's not the intellectual merit piece. And the second piece is the societal benefit piece. So that can be anything, right? Traditionally, we think of it as teaching and broadening participation, but with EPSCoR, you know, there's economic development, there's workforce development, there's all of these things. In fact, that might be the, you know, when I put the slide up about what to think about, that could be the main shiny broader impact for you, Scott. And then, you know, deployment to a class to sort of backfill the rest of the stuff that everybody else is doing. But what you're looking for in general is something where you get remembered in the second part of the discussion of the panel, right? Oh, I really like that proposal from South Dakota where this happened, right? So you're looking for something that panelists will remember as being unique.
Yeah, to kind of follow up on that a little bit, you know, with the broader impacts, do reviewers tend to think of it as, you know, just a box that needs to be checked that yes, there are broader impacts here, or is it a situation where, you know, the kind of the shinier you can make it, the stronger your proposal will be?
So I think it depends. My experience is it depends on what program and directorate you're in. I would say that for, you know, I keep picking on the mathematicians, so I apologize if there's any here in the room, but I have seen career proposals funded where the broader impacts are, you know, I will hire one undergraduate, and that's totally fine, right? I would say that for a lot of individual investigator awards, that the broader impacts are pretty much like you described, a box that needs to be checked. But Travis's statement earlier is correct. The broader impacts are the things that can lose you the proposal for the career. So, so I think for career in particular, having being able to articulate what those are in a nice, shiny way, I think that's important.
I would say maybe clarify one thing I said earlier. Maybe I didn't emphasize it enough. I had 3 specific aims, and one of them I dedicated to the educational platform specifically for the career. So I didn't just tuck my educational platform into the broader impacts. I put it right out front as this is one of my 3 aims. And then in the broader impacts, I then talk about it just like I would talk about the other 2 aims. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I don't see any more on the chat. Well, first off, I want to thank you for sharing your experiences. And I guess I'm going to ask a question here would be as the participants here are contemplating their plans and so forth. I know that in many cases, would you be open to if somebody, after this session, 2 days from now comes up with something, or if they send you an email and say, hey, I meant to ask this, but I forgot about it. And I presume you'd be willing to respond and provide them some help if that happens.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'll speak for myself. If any of you would like to chat more personally, one-on-one about what I did and didn't do, I've already I'm getting some emails from some of the participants already asking for some advice. So, I'll do my best to answer as much as I can in the time that I have. So.
Yeah, definitely same here.
Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your time today with us and so forth. Thank you everybody for attending. And I again, if you want to have a one-on-one discussion, anybody here regarding, I'm going to open it up, but hopefully it's okay with Kelvin, career or track 2 or 4 proposal, or even I'm going to say any NSF related proposal. Let me know. Let us know that you'd like to do that. And I guess our request, and Kelvin, you can add to this, would be a 1-page project description of what you're hoping to do or planning to do, that the target program that you would be going after, that you send that to actually do it this way, send that to the South Dakota EPSCoR office. You can send it either to me or Marcy Olson, and then we will arrange, share that with Kelvin and arrange for a time for that 30-minute debrief or discussion of that proposal. So, I encourage folks to take advantage of that opportunity. Kelvin, do you have anything you want to add here at the end regarding to that?
No, I think I think the process you've described is great. And from our perspective, these are fun conversations where we get to understand what you're thinking about and hopefully be useful to you in trying to conceptualize the plan and do whatever positioning you need to do with the agency. So we'd love to be able to help.
And then probably in that conversation, if you're planning and you decide afterwards that you're going to go forward, you can have a discussion a little bit about the general timeline in which they would look for, you'd have to comply with to enable the steps in terms of reviewing in different stages and so forth. Travis talked about that in their program, but Kelvin and the T.I.G review process has some of those similar similar aspects in that. So you could, talk about that. And then once, that's been determined, then we can go through the process of getting that formalized and set up.
Sounds great.
Any other final questions? If there is, if you have any, please, send me an email, give me a call, and we'll try and respond. And I think also any suggestions people have regarding a potential broader NSF or proposal writing workshop in a similar format, I would welcome that too, so that we can hopefully put it together for you and for others to participate in. And then also we will send out the slides to the participants, and also a reminder, if you want a recording of the presentation, send Marcy an email and she can get you access to that. No other comments, questions? If not, we will thank you. Thanks, Kelvin, for doing this, and thank everyone for joining. And I guess it's just a couple minutes after noon, so you can all go hopefully and enjoy your lunch or get back to work, whatever you choose to do.
Thank you all for your time.
Yep. Thanks for joining, and be safe.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Thank you.